On behalf of all assembled here today, I should now like to invite our newest alumnus, Dr. Cameron Bailey, to address Convocation.
Chancellor, Dean Milday, graduates, faculty, colleagues, Carolyn, my wife. It's a great honor to be here. To be referred to as Dr. Bailey is something I don't think I'll get used to. I didn't stick around long enough to earn one the honest way. But I'm very pleased to receive this honor today. If I seem familiar to you at all, it might be because you've seen me staring out at you doing like this outside Alumni Hall on that giant poster. Sorry. That thing's been here for longer than I was on campus when I was an undergraduate. My only hope is that amazing fake jazz hat that I was wearing gave you something to aspire to as you slogged your way through your courses. But these caps are nicer, aren't they? It's an honor to be back 30 years after my own convocation, and it's still a little hard to believe. Because when I attended Western, I lived, at least in my mind, as a subaltern. A word I learned on this campus, by the way, along with a whole lexicon of delicious theoretical language. Subaltern, like all the best words, has a contested meaning, but I took it to mean someone pushed to the periphery of society by social and political power. At Western, I was fortunate enough to have professors who helped me find the ideas that illuminated not just the books I was reading, but how I moved through this world. It was here that I came to understand how each one of us is shaped by various currents of power. So today, I'm going to speak to the people who don't belong here. Let me hang that phrase in the air for a minute. Maybe you don't belong because you came to Western as the very first person in your family ever to attend university, as I did. Maybe people made harmless jokes about your accent or your hair or your food or your body. Maybe you grew up on a farm and never got used to things that other people here took for granted. Maybe other people took their very bodies for granted when you couldn't. Maybe your people are the Attawandaron, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, or the Lenni Lenape, and despite the fact that they took care of this land for thousands of years, you found it hard to find your place within these gates. Maybe everybody else seems smarter than you or better at figuring out the university game, or cuter at parties. Maybe you had a secret self that you didn't share with your classmates or even your friends because you thought there was no place here to be the real you. In other words, despite the particular nature of how you didn't belong, maybe you're one of us, maybe you're everybody. But the great thing about a word like belong, also one of those best words, is that it can be an active verb. Belonging can be something that you do. In my day job, I'm the artistic director of TIFF, and my job is to deliver to our audience the emotion and the ideas that you find in films. We do it on a big scale every September at the Toronto International Film Festival, and we do it all year round at our building in Toronto, the Lightbox, and across Canada with community groups called Film Circuit. But what it always boils down to, wherever it is telling and interpreting stories. And if I've learned anything, it's that stories are one of the most powerful ways we have to belong. Language, traditions, stories, and creative expression are what we mean when we say the word culture. Culture is obviously not just the ballet or the music we heard coming in. It's not just paintings in museums. It's not just our shared rituals when we enter a Tim Hortons, as sacred as they may be. Culture may be the most single important thing that defines us as human. Many other animals share our social behavior and our DNA, but they don't tell ghost stories, as far as we know. For philosophers, artists, humanities graduates, culture is more than an anthropological event that separated us from animals, if, in fact, we should be separated from animals. Now, what I began to learn here and have tried to put into practice is the notion that culture depends on abstract thought, social relations, and narrative. Our gift for abstract thought allows us to use words to describe not just the things in front of us, but things from the past or the future or things that exist only in our imaginations. Abstract thought gave us math and agriculture, which depends on future planning. It also gives us the idea of money, which of course we know isn't real, no matter what your student debt may tell you. If abstract thought gives us concepts, narrative and social bonds give us culture. The idea of characters' actions producing consequences for themselves and for others that then lead to other actions is both the simplest and one of the most endlessly complex things that we do as humans. And stories take on meaning only when they communicate between the teller and the audience. Each of us tells and interprets stories unconsciously many times every day. When we read the newspaper, or watch a TV show, or describe an ambition, or when we use phrases like, "So I was like," and then she was like, and then I was all like, we're always deep in stories and in the culture that stories project. I watch a fair number of movies every year, a ridiculous number actually, around 700. It's a lot, but it's a fraction of the thousands of stories that each one of us consumes. What I like is that if you pay attention, stories form patterns, and some of those patterns persist and have become the foundations of how we live our lives. Hero goes on a journey. That's everything from Star Wars to Homer's Odyssey to the Bhagavad Gita. A stranger comes to town. That's every Clint Eastwood Western, most superhero origin stories, and also the New Testament. A lover pursues an object of desire. That's Sex and the City and Oedipus Rex. Stories form patterns. You can boil whole disciplines down to those three words: anthropology, literary theory, cinema studies, psychoanalysis, all different ways of saying that stories form patterns. And when those patterns resonate, they generate belonging. The other great thing about stories is that the most fundamental ones are so powerful that they can be reworked infinitely. The narratives we listened to thousands of years ago around fires at night are some of the same stories we play today on Xbox. Why would the spine of a story endure thousands of years of human evolution? Because we need it. Because we can't call ourselves human if we don't explain our psyches, our social behavior, and our very existence through our stories. The world's great religions are rooted in stories. Businesses and universities have stories that they call brands. Governments have stories they call messaging. Most of us have personal stories that we push out into the world on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. Maybe some of you are doing that right now. Don't stop. You're looking for others who connect with your story, your belonging. One thing I hadn't quite learned when I was at university, and I'm still learning now, is how the political conflicts that get us riled up, the opinions that enrage us, are just attempts to tell stories. When I was a student here, a professor named Philip Rushton proposed that black people had lower intelligence and lower levels of restraint. Asians, he proposed, had higher intelligence and restraint. Whites sat conveniently in the middle. Rushton's articles and speeches made him, for a while, the most famous university professor in the country. Back then, we marched and protested Rushton's racist ideas and his institutional power. Now I can see it as a sad little story, an attempt to establish his own identity as the norm, the center. Now we can just look at Philip Rushton's ideas and say, "Cool story, bro," and move on, because that story has no resonance. So if you're looking for answers, sooner or later you do well to turn to stories. It's why universities cut humanities programs at their peril. As our country and our world gets more complex, as change happens faster, stories may prove to be our most reliable analytical tool. We've all watched as facts have become less and less relevant to political discourse, as new Rushtons have sprung up at other universities. Facts no longer seem to be enough to combat hateful ideas anymore, but stories might do it. All of this is a long way of saying that the more you know about how stories work, the more stories you read, watch, listen to, or create, the more you deepen your understanding of the world we share. Use your stories. Belong. Thank you.